So I want to start today by walking into a room that I think a lot of you listening probably know, maybe a little too well.
Hmm.
It's sterile, the lights are just a bit too bright, and you're sitting on that crinkly paper on the exam table, and the doctor walks in, or maybe you just get a notification on your phone.
On the portal.
Right, on the portal, and you see these three letters, D-O-R.
Diminished Ovarian Reserve.
Exactly. And for most people, I think that acronym, it just lands like a physical blow. It feels like a door slamming shut.
Oh, it's incredibly heavy.
The immediate translation in your brain is just, it's over.
It is. It triggers this immediate
Hmm.
scarcity mindset. You see low AMH or high FSH, and the narrative just becomes, I'm running out of time, or even worse, I can't do this. It feels so final.
But that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We want to challenge that finality. We've been combing through this guide from the Berkley Center for Reproductive Wellness, and what struck me right away was their stance on this. They argue that DOR is not a stop sign, it's a detour sign.
It is such a crucial reframing.
Yeah.
And, we have to be careful with sources in the fertility space. There's so much toxic positivity out there.
Just believe it and it'll happen.
Exactly. But this isn't that. This guide is, it's dense, it's biology, it's protocols, it's chemistry. But the headline, the big takeaway is this. Diminished reserve does not mean you cannot get pregnant.
Okay, so let's parse that. Because if the reserve is diminished, that sounds like, I don't know, the factory's shutting down.
It means the factory's smaller. That's it. It means your body has fewer eggs in the warehouse, compared to the statistical average for your age. But, and this is the entire point of our conversation today,
right?
Getting pregnant doesn't take 1,000 eggs. It just takes one competent egg.
So we're shifting the goalposts here from volume to precision.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah.
That is the mantra. It has to be. Yeah. If you have DOR, trying to force your body to produce, say, 20 eggs, which is what a lot of standard IVF protocols aim for, it's like trying to run a marathon at a sprint pace. You're just going to collapse. The Berkley Center's whole approach is about finding the specific strategy to get the right 1 or 2 eggs, not a bucket full of eggs that won't work anyway.
To do that, though, we have to look under the hood. I really want to talk about the labs, because I feel like most of our listeners are pretty savvy. They know the acronyms AMH and FSH.
Yeah.
But reading this guide, I realize most people, myself included, don't really get the dynamic between them. They're not separate scores. They're talking to each other.
They're completely linked. Think of it like a supply and demand economy that's just happening inside your endocrine system.
Okay, supply and demand. Let's break that down. AMH, anti-Müllerian hormone. We usually just call this the egg count.
Right. AMH is the supply. It's a protein. And it's secreted by all those tiny microscopic follicles just sitting in the vault. So if there are a lot of follicles, there's a lot of protein. High AMH.
And if the vault's getting a little empty?
The protein levels drop. It's purely an inventory number. That's all it is.
Okay, so that's the warehouse inventory. Then we have FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. I always assumed a high FSH was a good thing. Like, don't you want to stimulate the follicles?
You want stimulation, sure, but what you really want is a response. See, FSH comes from the brain, the pituitary gland, and its job is to tell the ovaries, hey, send up an egg.
Okay.
If the ovaries are full and they're responsive, the brain only has to whisper, so you get a low FSH.
But if the ovaries are kind of ignoring the signal?
The brain grabs a megaphone and starts screaming. That's what a high FSH is. It's the brain yelling, I said, we need an egg down here. So when you see that high number, it's a sign the system is struggling to communicate.
That makes so much sense. It's like the engine is revving really, really high just to get the car to move 5 miles an hour.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But here's the nuance that I think gets missed so often in standard care.
Yeah.
You can't just lump every DOR patient into one bucket. The guide points out that a patient with low AMH and high FSH, that revving engine, is biologically different from a patient with low AMH and normal FSH.
Wait, explain that. If the AMH is low in both cases, isn't the problem basically the same?
Not necessarily. The patient with the high FSH, she has quiet or resistant ovaries. They need a real wake-up call. The patient with normal FSH, though, she might have low numbers, but her signaling pathways are working just fine. So if you treat them both with the same aggressive max dose protocol, you might completely fry the eggs of the second patient and still fail to wake up the first.
This is your check engine light idea. The light comes on for both people, but for one, it's the transmission. For the other, it's just a loose gas cap.
Yes. And you don't replace the transmission to fix a gas cap. And yet, in so many high-volume clinics, Everyone gets the transmission replacement. They get the standard kitchen sink protocol.
Okay, so that brings us to the really actionable part of this deep dive. The Berkley Center Guide outlines 2 very specific strategies tailored to these different engines. The first one is called the microflare Luperon protocol.
Microflare. This is a classic, you could say, aggressive strategy for that truly resistant ovary.
Now, I have to pause on the word Luperon, because I know people who've taken Luperon for, say, endometriosis or before transfer, and it's used to shut everything down.
Puts you into temporary menopause.
Right. So how does a drug that shuts you down help you grow eggs? It seems totally contradictory.
It does, right. But it's brilliant pharmacology. See, Luperon is what we call an agonist. And eventually, if you take it long enough, it desensitizes the pituitary and it shuts down hormone production. But right when you first take it, just for the first few days, it does the exact opposite.
The flare.
The flare. Exactly. It causes the pituitary to just dump all of its stored FSH and LH at once. It's this massive, massive surge. The microflare protocol is all about capturing that initial surge to kickstart the ovaries.
So you're basically cooking the door open right before you lock it.
That's a great way to think about it. You use that initial burst of your body's own hormones to recruit the follicles, to wake them up from their slumber. And then, once they're awake, you come in with these synthetic injections to keep them growing.
The guide used the analogy of turning up the volume.
Yes. If the ovaries are, hard of hearing, which is that high FSH profile, you need to turn the volume knob to 11 right at the start just to get them to listen.
So this is for the patient whose engine is really struggling, the high FSH, low AMH. My ovaries are sleeping patient.
Correct. The classic poor responder.
Is there a danger in screaming at the ovaries, though?
Absolutely. And this is why that check engine diagnosis is so important. If you use this protocol on someone whose ovaries aren't actually resistant, maybe they just have low numbers, that massive flare of hormones can fry the eggs.
Fry is a technical term.
It might as well be in the lab. It forces the eggs to mature way too quickly. The nucleus of the egg, the DNA part, it might separate prematurely, or the membrane becomes brittle. You might get eggs, but they won't fertilize, or they won't make it to day 5.
So if the wake-up call is too aggressive, or if you don't fit that profile, what's the alternative? The guide pivots to strategy number 2, the estrogen priming antagonist protocol.
Let's call this one the organizer.
The organizer. I like that.
Yeah.
Because while the microflare was all about volume and force, this one seems to be about timing.
It is, 100%.
Yeah.
The biggest issue for some door-to-door patients isn't that they can't grow an egg. It's that they grow them unevenly. It's what I call the Usain Bolt problem.
Walk us through the race.
Okay. In a normal cycle, you want a group of follicles, a cohort, to all start growing at the same time and cross the finish line together. But with door-to-door, often one dominant follicle is just more sensitive than the others. So as soon as that FSH starts to rise, that one follicle just sprints ahead.
Becomes a resource hog.
It does. It grows huge. It sucks up all the blood supply. And biologically, it actually releases chemicals that suppress the other tiny follicles. So you get to retrieval day, you've got one giant overcooked egg and maybe 4 tiny ones that are totally useless.
So how does estrogen priming fix that race?
You take estrogen before the cycle even starts, in the luteal phase of the month before. And that estrogen quiets the FSH down. It effectively holds all the runners at the starting line. It tells that Usain Bolt follicle, nope, you wait here with everyone else.
It synchronizes the pack.
Exactly. It creates a synchronized cohort. So when you finally do start the stimulation meds, they all take off from the starting block together.
So instead of one sprinter and a bunch of people still tying their shoes, you get a whole team running in formation.
That's the goal. And for the patient, this feels very, very different. It's a much calmer cycle. You're not getting that huge flare of hormones. It's a real slow and steady wins the race kind of approach.
And I'm guessing this is better for egg quality?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Because the eggs aren't being shocked or rushed. They're growing in a much more supportive, even environment.
Speaking of environment, I want to get into the weeds of egg quality for a minute. Quality is such a buzzword. Everyone says it. We need good quality. But the guide actually defines what that means biologically. And it brings up a hormone I feel like gets completely ignored, LH.
Luteinizing hormone. I call it the juice.
We usually only talk about LH as the trigger shot, right? The LH surge is what pops the egg out. But the Berkley Center focuses on LH during the growth phase.
This is the real deep dive science right here. We obsess over follicle size, in millimeters. But size is just the shell. LH is what determines what's happening inside the battery.
The battery.
Think of the egg as a cell that has to perform this massive task, meiosis, chromosome division. That takes a huge amount of energy, ATP. LH is the hormone that drives the production of that energy. It stimulates the silica cells to produce androgens, which get converted to estrogen. But the point is, LH charges the mitochondrial battery.
So if you suppress LH too much, which some protocols do, you could have a follicle that looks perfect on an ultrasound, but the egg inside is dead.
Dead might be strong, but the battery is empty. It just doesn't have the fuel to separate its chromosomes correctly. So you fertilize it, and it rests. It stops growing on day 3 because it ran out of gas.
This is the Goldilocks principle the guide mentioned.
Exactly. You need enough LH to charge the battery, but not so much that you overripen the egg. It has to be just right. And this is why cookie-cutter medicine fails so often. If your doctor isn't monitoring your LH levels or adjusting for them, they're ignoring half the equation.
This idea of charging the battery, it leads perfectly into the integrative section because the guide talks a lot about acupuncture. And I'll be honest, when I see acupuncture in a medical guide, I usually think, okay, relaxation, stress relief.
Right. It's just about Zen.
Yeah. But they're making a physiological argument here that connects directly to what we just said about energy.
It's not about Zen. It's about hemodynamics. It's about blood flow.
Explain that connection. How do needles in my shin help the ATP in my egg?
It's the delivery system. I mean, how does the oxygen and the hormones, the LH, the FSH, how does it get to the ovary? Through tiny microcapillaries. And if you're stressed, and let's be real, IVF is the most stressful thing. Your body is in sympathetic nervous system dominance, fight or flight.
Which tightens the blood vessels.
Vasoconstriction. Your body shunts blood to your muscles to run from the tiger. And it shunts blood away from non-essential organs like your ovaries. So you're spending thousands of dollars on these meds, but the roads to the factory are closed.
So the acupuncture is literally reopening the highway.
Correct. It forces vasodilation. It lowers the resistance in the uterine and ovarian arteries. It makes sure that the juice we just talked about actually reaches the egg.
What I found fascinating, and this goes right back to strategy, is that the acupuncture schedule isn't random. It actually changes based on the drug protocol you're on.
This is how you know it's clinical and not just, a spa treatment.
Right. So if you're on the microflare, that wake-up call protocol, what does the schedule look like?
They want you in there early and often, 2, maybe 3 times a week, starting before the cycle even begins.
Yeah.
And why? Because the microflare relies on that initial recruitment. You need the blood flow to be at a maximum right at the start so the ovaries can hear that wake-up call.
But if you're on the estrogen priming protocol,
it changes. That protocol is all about calm, slow organization. So you go less frequently, maybe once or twice a week, and you start later. You don't want to overstimulate. You just want to support that steady growth.
it's completely customized to the biology. There's one more strategic piece we have to cover, and it's about the finish line. The separation of church and state, or in this case, embryo creation and implantation.
The freeze-all strategy.
The guide argues that for Dodor patients specifically, trying to do a fresh transfer, putting the embryo back in just a few days after retrieval might be a huge mistake.
Well, think about the environment we just described. We've been turning up the volume. We've been spiking hormones to grow these eggs. That creates a really chaotic hormonal environment inside the uterus. The lining might be completely out of sync. It might even be hostile to an embryo.
So the soil is bad because we've been farming so aggressively.
Exactly. So the strategy is compartmentalize. Focus 100% on getting the egg and making the best embryo you can. Then stop. Freeze it. Let your body crash, let the hormones return to baseline, and then you come back a month later in a quiet, natural-ish cycle to plant the seed.
It takes so much pressure off, too. You don't have to win the entire championship in one game.
And biologically, the success rates for frozen transfers in this population are often higher just because the landing strip is finally clear.
I want to pivot now. We've been very tactical: hormones, blood flow, protocols, but the guide includes the section that I think is just as important. It acknowledges the emotional reality of this diagnosis, and it uses a word we don't hear enough in medical settings: grief.
It is grief. It's a very specific kind of disenfranchised grief. You're not just grieving a loss. You're grieving the loss of an idea. You're grieving spontaneity. You're grieving the fact that your body, which you've trusted your whole life, suddenly feels like a broken machine.
You are more than this cycle. That was the phrase that really stood out to me.
It's essential. The danger with BOR is that the protocol becomes your entire identity. You just become a professional patient. The Berkley Center emphasizes finding anchors, things that tether you to who you were before you knew what FSH meant.
Journaling, walking, refusing to talk about fertility with certain friends.
Whatever it is that keeps you human.
Before we wrap up, I want to give you, the listener, something really concrete. We've talked about a lot of complex science. If you're listening to this and you have an appointment with your doctor next week, what do you actually say? The guide gives us a script.
It does, and it's so powerful because so often we get that white coat silence. We just nod and say, okay, you need to go in armed.
Okay. Question 1. Is my primary issue egg number, egg quality, or timing?
Don't let them just say "dewar." Make them define the mechanism. Are my ovaries just empty, or are they disorganized?
Question 2. Why did you choose this specific protocol for me?
Make them show their work. If they put you on the microflare, ask, do I fit the profile for this? Am I resistant? If they put you on standard meds, ask, why aren't we priming?
And the contingency plan. What do we do if this cycle underperforms?
Don't wait for the crash to ask about the airbag. Know the next step before you even start.
And finally, the real deep dive question. How are we supporting LH and egg quality specifically?
That is the power move. Asking about LH tells your doctor you understand that growth is not the same as health. It changes the dynamic from doctor-patient to partner-partner.
And if they get annoyed by those questions?
Then you have learned something very, very important about your doctor. A good physician wants an engaged patient. If they dismiss you, well, you might need a new mechanic.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. From the check engine light of the labs to the mechanics of the flare to the battery charge of LH.
It is a lot. But if there's one thread tying it all together, it's strategy. The diagnosis of Diodor is not a verdict. It's a puzzle.
And the Berkley Center leaves us with one final, very important affirmation. You are not broken.
You are not broken. You're just navigating a really complex map, and you just need the right compass.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We spend so much mental energy obsessing over the number on the lab report, that AMH level. We treat it like a credit score. But what if we stopped obsessing over the number of seeds in the bag and focused entirely on the quality of the soil, the hormones, the blood flow, the energy support? How does that change the way we view success?
In nature, the soil usually matters more than the seed count.
Maybe it's time we adopted that view too. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Take care of yourselves.
Goodbye, everyone.